Alors j'ai déjà trop parlé et le temps passe, donc je vais tout de suite passer la parole à Monsieur le Commissaire Piebalgs. Merci, c'est à vous.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, yesterday in Parliament we have had a particular event for Baltic states, 20 years of regaining of independence. And there is, well, some things that the President of Estonia mentions that Baltic states are, people from this are usually very presenting themselves with some type of humility. And this time I would say, well, I am really very much privileged that I will have more speaking times than any other. So I really need to apologize to other colleagues that 3 minutes against 20 minutes plus definitely is a lot of advantage to me. But even taking in 20 minutes, there will be only a couple of elements that I will be able to address during this presentation. And I would start saying that I believe that what we are presenting, it's a new chapter in the European development policy, because it's drawing on past achievements and making changes to build upon existing conditions for the better and efficient aid that makes more changes on the ground. So the agenda for change you have in front of you introduces a raft of important changes to how we do development policy, while at the same time building on the good things that have come out of our development policy and the European consensus on development in particular. The agenda is the result of a period of intense consultations and reflection in which you have all played your part. It is a solid blueprint to take us forward into a future in which we make a bigger and faster difference than ever before to the lives of people in developing countries. Forward into a future in which those people have the opportunity to pull themselves out of poverty. Forward into a future in which every euro we spend delivers more opportunities. Before I go on, let's take stock. I realize I am somewhat preaching to the converted here, but it sometimes does us good to remind ourselves why we do what we do and that the aid really does work. Now I know there are plenty of aid skeptics out there in the European Union as well who would rather see money spent elsewhere. But I think this is a very short-sighted approach. To them I would ask just this. What about the 85,000 female students who have been able to enroll in secondary education thanks to our support? What about the 5 million children who won't have to suffer the consequences of measles because we have helped get them vaccinated? What about the 31 million households now connected to drinking water? And I could continue on and on. I have learned that the aid we have given over past decades has made a real difference to real people. Whether in a hospital in Djibouti, or at a wind farm in Vanuatu, or at a veterinary laboratory in Afghanistan, I have seen aid at work with my own eyes. Every one of you knows that we still face huge development challenges. The green shoots of change are there, but we need to do more and nurture them. My pride in what we in Europe have achieved in development is tempered only by a sense of frustration that there is much more for us to do. More to get the world's poorest countries out of the cycle of poverty and onto the ladder of prosperity. More to prevent people dying needlessly and from being born into a life without opportunity. More to deliver better aid and get better, sustainable results. We have a duty to European citizens and to people in developing countries to get the most from our resources. Not only is that a good development policy, it makes good financial sense as well. And tackling the root causes of poverty and insecurity to give developing countries and their people the opportunities they deserve will open up opportunities for us too. A developing world freed from the shackles of poverty and insecurity and given the chance to grow will make for more prosperity and security all over the world. Put simply, investment in developing world's future is investment in our own future as well. As the Vice President of the World Bank, Mrs. Obiageli Ezekwesili, recently said, the world's economic recovery will need the economic growth that Africa is enjoying and can continue to enjoy. In short, world need Africa. But be in no doubt, we can rise to these challenges, and we will. We have proposed a budget framework for the coming years that will enable the European Union to pursue its leading role on the world's development stage. Through Member States' efforts, we must meet our 0.7% of ODA target. Our task is to channel the resources available to us strategically, where they are needed most and can make most of the difference. The time is right for us to step up a gear and move into the fast lane. We have been doing well so far, but the capacity for us to build on our successes and do better going forward is there. We must also understand that the context in which we plan and act has shifted. For instance, a number of former developing countries have caught up with developed countries and even become aid donors in their own right. The Arab Spring has highlighted the thirst for democracy and for a brighter future. Yet, we continue to wrestle with a worldwide financial crisis that has left the most vulnerable economies even more exposed and put a strain on our own finances. Against this backdrop, to rise to the challenge of spending our resources wisely and well, we must set our sights very high. Being the biggest player is well and good, but I want us to be the best as well. And being the best means getting the work done efficiently and with lasting results. Our 12-point agenda for change has been designed to bring about the changes that will make our development policy the best in the world. Let me take you through 3 of the areas in which we hope to make this happen. I shall start with governance. Good governance is a key to a country's basic development and poverty reduction efforts. Reducing poverty for good requires robust and honest state institutions that are both able and willing to help poor people improve their standards of living and to provide them with public services, rights, and security. Likewise, democratic processes make the state accountable to its citizens, encourage transparency, and guard against corruption. Basically, they allow for constructive relations between government and people. So our development support should also be a spur to democratic governance and respect for human rights. It needs to offer incentives to democratic reform processes and at the same time actively support developing countries in making positive changes for the better. Think of development policy and governance as 2 sides of the same coin. On one side, development policy and action can help bring about positive improvements in governance. On the flip side, improvements in governance can play an often critical role in reducing poverty, including in this the crucial role of parliaments, civil society and NGOs is holding governments to account for their actions, even at local level. It is a role that needs strengthening and that we will support. It will therefore be a greater focus of budget support contracts in the future. and aid will be directed as a positive vector for change. Likewise, empowering women is a key to concrete progress on the ground. That being said, human rights are, by their very nature, universal. They form part of the human race's basic value set. As such, they should be defended regardless of their benefit to development efforts. So the governance is a key to basic development. Equally, however, countries won't pull themselves out of poverty unless they can find a way to grow. We have already seen proof of this, well, for example, in Timor-Leste, where EU assistance has been critical to the country's robust economic growth of about 35% over the last 3 years. Other remarkable results include lower poverty levels, 83% school enrollment, and a rise in life expectancy from nearly 46 years in 1990 to 61.5 years in 2009. So the EU aid really is a catalyst for growth and human development. Growth is first and foremost about the human beings who actually create it. We must do more to further human development. We must ensure that people are healthy, educated, and able to find decent jobs. And we must help countries set up their own social protection schemes. We will continue to focus, as a minimum, 20% of EU funding on health and education. And in particular, we will increase our focus on women, transforming the Gender Action Plan into a living tool and leading by example. Clearly, in seeking growth, our watchwords must be sustainability and inclusiveness. Growth that cannot last and only benefits a few in society will be of no use in spurring on development and poverty reduction. At the end of the day, our efforts on governance, growth and human development are all geared towards enabling the world's poorest to climb up the ladder of prosperity. In fact, I cannot stress the word inclusive enough. If projects won't deliver benefits to the wider society, we clearly should not and we won't support them. Some sectors in particular must be at the forefront of our push for growth. Sustainable and inclusive agriculture and energy feature highly in our agenda for change, and with good reason. No country has ever pulled itself out of poverty without first being able to feed its population. During my recent visit to the Horn of Africa, I witnessed at first hand the devastating consequences of hunger and malnutrition in a small children's hospital. Hunger and malnutrition kill. It's that simple. We must do all we can to enable countries to feed themselves. Likewise, no country has ever pulled itself out of poverty without first being able to secure its energy supply. The recent initiative of UN Secretary General, the High-Level Panel on Energy for All, on which I am proud to serve, has the aim of ensuring basic energy services for every global citizen by 2030. It is perfectly possible to achieve this with the necessary political determination. I, for one, am determined that it will succeed. Through robust support for agriculture and energy in our partner countries, we can help shield them from shocks such as scarcity of resources and supply or price volatility. The road out of poverty also involves creating a favorable business environment for the local private sector. We should explore new ways in which we can collaborate with the private sector to deliver sustainable and inclusive growth. One of the instruments could be stronger use of grant loan blending, which has unlocked already more than €20 billion in projects financing for EU development policy since 2007. Blending mechanisms help beneficiaries achieve easier and faster access to financing with appropriate conditions. We should further explore leveraging options for our grant resources. Reducing poverty and achieving the Millennium Development Goals will only happen if we do everything we can to maximize the results. We have a number of avenues to explore to make our results count. Lending is one. Another is better aid coordination with others, especially EU member states, along with improved policy coherence for development. We already co-finance programs and projects and work through delegated cooperation. In future, we also intend to step up joint programming of our aid to make it at once more coherent, more effective, and more visible. Simpler programming and better EU coordination can make for better planned, more transparent, and more predictable aid flows, the right recipe for more and better results. And then we have a budget support. We are launching our proposed new policy for budget support alongside our agenda for change, because we recognize just how important budget support is to implementing development policy, getting aid delivered, and achieving more and better results on the ground. There are no two ways about it. With budget support, we can address the source, not just the symptoms of underdevelopment, and provide a strong platform to engage with our partner countries in a broad policy dialogue on key development issues. In fact, budget support remains our preferred aid modality. The excellent results that budget support can deliver are there for us all to see. Take education in Mali, for example. Between 2002 and 2009, the gross enrollment rate for basic education rose from 64% to 81%, and the completion rate from 40% to 56%. Over that same period, the number of children in schools shot up from 1.3 to 1.9 million. Without the additional funding provided through budget support from the EU, it would have been impossible for the government to build the schools, train and pay the teachers, and produce the textbooks to achieve these very positive and sustainable results. We know that our approach to budget support has not been perfect. We have listened to criticism, analyzed our approach, and responded with ideas for improving and refining it on a number of fronts. For instance, the reference to contracts in the communication reflects the step change we want for budget support in terms of deliverables and mutual accountability. We will provide general budget support through these contracts only if our partners are on track with respect to human rights, democracy, and rule of law. Where conditions do not exist to permit the use of general budget support, sector budget support remains a tool that can be used to improve governance, and often it is the best delivery mechanism in a specific sector. Through budget support, we will also promote sound financial management, mobilizing domestic resources, and fighting corruption. This is crucial if we are to break the cycle of aid dependency and enable partner countries gradually to stand on their own 2 feet. Partner country budgets cannot come under closer scrutiny unless budget information is publicly available. We are committed to strengthening budget transparency by making it a specific eligibility criterion for budget support. Finally, back to results. Results matter. That's a fact. We agree that donors must do more to demonstrate the results of development cooperation. With a common results framework, the EU and its member states would be speaking with one voice to explain what development cooperation is about and what results have been achieved. We would be making our results more visible, boosting aid transparency and improving the coordination process. And we would be making ourselves more accountable. Mutual accountability is the focus as we approach the 4th high-level forum on aid effectiveness in Busan. This tricky process will prove worthwhile if it focuses minds and action on the sustainable results. Ladies and gentlemen, one last thought. Last year I visited Uzbekistan and learned about the project funded by the EU in cooperation with UNICEF, which by providing information and training for women's health has brought about a huge drop in infant and maternal mortality in Uzbekistan. Of course, my first reaction on hearing this good news was, this is aid working in practice. And the second reaction was, if we achieve this kind of change for the better in Uzbekistan, why can't we achieve as much, if not more, elsewhere? And the answer definitely is, we can. Armed with a more strategic, up-to-date development policy and new approach to budget support, we can now set about doing more, doing better, and replicating success. You have helped shape the agenda for change. It's your agenda, I hope at least, as much as ours. We hope you will embrace it. It's about doing our best for our partner countries in the developing world and making change for the better. In doing so, we will be investing in everyone's future. The 2 communications we are launching today are a call to action. I am really ready to take up that call. I hope you are too. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Commissaire. Vous avez respecté votre temps à 2 minutes près. C'était bon. Bon, alors on va avancer et je vais passer la parole à Simon Maxwell de ODI, Overseas Development Institute. C'est à vous, Simon, pour 10 minutes tout rond. Merci.
Let me begin as you might expect, but this is more than a routine acknowledgement, by thanking you, Commissioner, for your leadership in this area. I think it's an interesting question what we expect of our leaders. We want the vision, we want the rhetoric which inspires us, and we also want the practical action which will deliver change. And sometimes with leaders we get one of those 3 and we don't get the other 2. I think in this case we have a very good chance of achieving all 3, and I want to thank you for that, because it is not an easy job. Leadership in the European Union particularly is in many ways a particularly difficult challenge. And the way I think of what you've been trying to do is that you're standing on one side of a valley and you have to get across to the other side, but between you and the other side there are a number of rivers. And the rivers contain wildlife of some kind or another. Sometimes they are gentle goldfish, sometimes they are piranhas, and you probably don't know which are the goldfish and which are the piranhas until you notice that your leg has been bitten off as you try to cross the river. This process has already been going on for something like a year and some months, and will go on now for another 7 months until the Council approves and the Parliament approve the final policy, probably not until May next year. So this river that you're crossing is very, this valley you're crossing is very wide, and the rivers are numerous. First you've had to negotiate the Commission, because these papers don't come out until all members of the College have agreed them. You have to satisfy the member states, all 27 of them, any of whom can provide obstacles on the road. You have to satisfy the Parliament, which also has many different interests, and you have to satisfy the recipient countries, the ACP and the others, all of whom are demanding. And then, the deepest river and the one with most piranhas, you have to cross the river which contains the NGOs and the academics, who have strong views, as I'm sure we'll hear. So it takes a brave person, woman or man, to set out on this journey, and a very, very determined one to succeed and take us successfully to the other side. I think you've begun to do that. But understanding the nature of that challenge also gives us in the room a responsibility to make sure that the comments we make, if you like, are constructive and help to achieve the final mission, and not simply to undermine the process by asking for more and more things to be added in and for the programme to become more and more of a Christmas tree. We will see in June, after the Council has approved the document next May, whether the document is the same as the one we have today, or whether it is significantly different. And there is a real risk that on a number of themes in here there will be erosion rather than accretion during the next 7 months. Now, there are 4 key new themes that we've pulled out of the report, and I think all of those the Commissioner has mentioned, bar one. First of all, good governance, conditionality linked to new forms of budget support with the word contract in the title. Understandable and necessary, with 1 or 2 pitfalls to worry about how conditionality will be implemented and whether we'll be able to use the mutual accountability procedures embedded in the Cotonou Agreement in order to make sure that we are not arbitrary in our use of the instruments that we have. Secondly, I applaud, and I'm sure many do, your renewed focus on growth, and particularly on agriculture, but actually even more so energy. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate you on being nominated to Ban Ki-moon's new panel. You know, and I might come back to this in a minute, we're in the middle of a new industrial revolution stimulated by climate change and the reactions to it. In Copenhagen last week at the Green Growth Leaders Conference, the recurrent theme was disruptive innovation. The search for new technologies and new business models that will revolutionize not just energy but many other aspects of life, housing, transport and so on. The real risk is that developing countries will be excluded from this new industrial revolution. The real opportunity is that they will partake fully in it in an inclusive and sustainable way. If we sit back, nothing will happen. I think you've put us on the road to making sure that is not the case. Thirdly, differentiation. It's important to say that although 72% of the poor live in middle-income countries are middle-income because they have more money than low-income countries. And in the end, whatever else aid does, it transfers money from rich countries to poor countries. And I think we have to ask very seriously how much aid we want to be giving and how much the countries want aid when they have aid programs of their own, substantial foreign exchange reserves and so on. We've been going through an agonizing debate in my own country about aid to countries like South Africa and India and China and many others in that category. Finally, the topic that you haven't mentioned very much in your speech, Commissioner, is the joint programming, the need for us to act as one. I think that is a topic that we'll come back to, but is particularly controversial among some among some member states, but there are real costs to the proliferation and the duplication of agencies that we have at present. Now, have you finished? What do I hope you'll do between now and next May? I think there's some unfinished business in this document. I love it that it's short. I applaud the Secretary-General for insisting that no document should be longer than whatever it is, 12 pages. But there are some details still to fill in. I think it's fine to say that some countries will receive more aid than others, but I'd like to know which countries will receive less and how much more. It's fine to say that more will be spent on growth and energy and agriculture and perhaps less on some other things. One of these days you will have to tell us, I think, how much more and how much less. Of course, all this is very difficult to decide until the multi-annual financial framework has been decided. So there is a kind of Rubik's Cube puzzle to be solved here. There's also more to do on policy coherence for development and on joined-up thinking. That's the point I want to finish on, Eric, if I may, just have another minute. As you've looked around the world in planning this change of course for us, and as we look around the world today, what I think we see is that there are forest fires burning in almost every direction we look. Certainly, looking in every direction outside this building, you will see the barbed wire ready for the council meeting at the weekend. And I'm sure that any demonstrations will be peaceful and constructive, but we should not ignore the fact that there is a global economic crisis on our doorstep, that it will affect the prospects for developing countries, and that many people are likely to be made poorer as a result of the adjustments that will be necessary. There is a core crisis to do with continuing poverty in the world, and that's what drives all of us. 500,000 women a year dying in childbirth. 500 million children out of school, 10 million children who are undernourished with hugely increased risk of a death and illness during their adulthood. These are unacceptable numbers, as the Commissioner has said, and they are the prime motor of everything we do, but we have to engage in a different way in middle-income countries. In 2008, we had a food crisis. In 2011, we have a food crisis. The wholesale price of maize in the summer, in July, in Kampala, was 122% higher than it had been a year previously. 122% increase in food prices when people spend 80% of their income on food. That is a sure pointer to malnutrition, illness, and even death. The food crisis is, of course, about Somalia, but it's about many other things as well. Climate change. Nobody now thinks, or nobody privately now thinks, that we can hold climate warming to 2 degrees. We have to learn to adjust to a world of 4 degrees, a creeping crisis and associated, as I've said, with a new industrial revolution. And finally, the interaction between food and land and water, the theme of the new European Development Report, which is being edited and led by my colleague Dirk Willem te Velde, coming out later this year, absolutely forcing us to confront the planetary boundaries of the earth we live in. These are not trivial issues, and they have 2 things in common. The first is that these forest fires, these burning platforms, these huge global challenges that we face to the well-being of developing countries, but also to our own welfare, those huge challenges cannot be solved by aid alone. They are challenges which require joined-up thinking across the European Commission, involving, of course, aid, but also our trade policy, our migration policy, our agriculture policy, our climate policy, and many others. We look to the Commissioner on Development to be our leader in that area, to be fighting for developing countries, to be fighting for inclusive development right across that board. And the big challenge, and I think the challenge we will want to be held accountable for tackling, lies in that territory of these big global problems. We have a responsibility as those interested in EU development cooperation to have these real-world problems at the heart of what we do. That's what the results agenda means. Results means, of course, having people living less in poverty and managing to achieve better livelihoods for themselves and their families, but it also means having a secure and stable environment in which we can deliver those goods to people. So we have a responsibility as EU actors and as leaders. We want to be held accountable for those things. Actually, we want you to be held accountable for them as well. And I hope what we can do in the conversation later on this afternoon is to focus not on the micro detail of these 2 excellent communications, both the budget support and the agenda for change, but try to understand what we can do to support the leadership in delivering serious momentum beyond the rhetoric, beyond the practical proposals that will make a difference at this global scale. Thank you.